Hey y'all, this is Erson. Welcome back. Welcome back to Eternal. We're gonna go through the rest of the factions as we did. We kind of put that one off for a little bit, but now we're back. We have the time, and let's go explore, shall we? So again, this is kind of getting the feel of each faction in Eternal, feel how the color pairings work, kind of get the flavor, and see how it all shakes out. So first and foremost, Time and Primal. That combination is known as the Elysian. This is the crest of wisdom. There's a lady talking to a dinosaur. There's another thing of banners, which is a dude with a thing around his neck and a seat in between water. So what are the Elysians? Basically, the whole idea behind them, remember, Time is a faction of knowledge, depth and breadth, and Primal being the faction of nature, and its wisdom and fury. These are a bunch of crazy explorers. They seek knowledge out in the wild places. Kind of the vibe here, right? They find new, weird, and wonderful things, mess with things, and kind of probably get into weird troubles, but they find really interesting things in the world. They ride dinosaurs, in many cases, Derricathane, for example. We found cool things like storm lynxes. Let's do the shiny version, because that's really neat. Elemental-based cats, bears with wings under accelerated evolution, frog princes that aren't really princes, dinosaur hatchlings, all the whole 9 yards. This is actually a really fun card. Super undercosted 5/5 that turns into a frog if it's ever targeted directly. I think it's just a great design. Things like that. So, I mean, the faction has a very clear vibe to it. The champion's also pretty tight. There's a lot of, going out there, finding what's out there and gaining knowledge that way. A lot of dinosaur themes, things that, yeah, I know, right? A lot of dinosaurs themselves. And these colors also have dinosaurs within them, so it's a good pairing. They don't really have kind of a thing that they do. Like, a lot of abilities and keywords are really associated with certain factions. Here, there really isn't one, so I think Elysian struggles a little bit with identity, per se, as like really, this is what Elysian characters or creatures do, besides having a pretty strong explorer and dinosaur theme throughout it. So, I think it's a really neat flavored faction. I think there's a little bit of work to be done to really shake it out and make sure that it all has its really unique identity. But yeah, the Elysians are that sort of thing. Explorer Emeritus, this is what they look like after they've retired, and they have a dragon's eye. BT dubs, there is a dragon missing an eye in the game. Actually, let's find Curiox real quick. Not what I had in mind. I don't want to filter, no. I want to go to Curiox and go to crafting. Curiox the Collector. Yeah, Curiox is missing an eye. Anyway, alrighty, so that's the Elysians, more or less. We have a little bit of there's elemental packs of illusions. They really cool esoteric things they find. Like, bro, I have no idea what I saw last week. It's totally tight, That's the kind of vibe that Elysian goes for, and it kind of hits it. So, that was Elysian. Next combination, Time and Shadow. So knowledge and subterfuge. So these are the Xenon. So the Xenon are a bunch of crazy cultists living on the edge of Shadowlands, which is a place that basically you walk into and die for the most part. Kind of weird. They definitely have a weird, creepy, sacrificial cult vibe to them. Notice the pointy daggers in the background and stuff. And they worship these things called Radiants. Radiants come in two flavors. Umbrans, which are dark, and Lumens, which are light. This guy is kind of a mix of both right there. You have these two, like the Mitotic Wisps. And this guy's exactly a mix. He's probably that same dude. These Radiants, these Wisps, those are the two tribes that are here a lot, and then cultists, lots and lots of cultists. This faction is flavored kind of in the forbidden knowledge side of things. Beverage to explain further. I mean, Kool-Aid. So they take knowledge that they discover through these weird rituals, and then they keep it from the world and keep it a mystery to everyone else while they are privy to the mysteries and so much better. That's really kind of the vibe. In general, they're not very nice people. There's a lot of life draining, a lot of direct damage, a lot of kill spells, poison, deadly, things of that nature here. So the Xenon are not, like your best buds in the universe. Cruciation. CEG, right? There's a lot of like sacrificial Chris's and daggers and stuff showing up in the art. Drinking blood. Yeah, there's a whole lot of really creepy shit going on. One of the coolest champions in the game, Champion of Mystery, he has a giant scythe with a lantern. That's pretty dope, no matter how you ride, no matter what you're into. That's a pretty cool illustration. But yeah, lots of things of like torture and sacrifice is really kind of the Xenon vibe. You get weird relics like the Mask of Torment, where every time you gain life or drink the health of something else, you gain maximum power, which then you play the giant tormentor dude and kill stuff. It's a neat faction with a very clear flavor. Probably one of the better flavored factions in the game, honestly. You know exactly what you're getting into. Plus, they have these crazy radiant looking. She's obviously like a mix of the two. They see the Umbran side and the Lumen side. They used to have, or still kind of have, a dinosaur flavor. They're not doing a good job maintaining that one, though, so that one's kind of dead. But yeah, those are the Zine in a nutshell. Alright, next faction up. Now that I can breathe again. Good lord. It's been a rough time recording stuff. Let's jump on in. Next faction is Justice and Primal. These are the Huru. As you can see, lots of nature themes, lots of owl themes. This is all true. So, the Huru, what are the Huru? The Huru are kind of a bunch of, I guess, naturally attuned. They go to the wisdom side of the nature side of the Primal faction. And they use that power to subtly influence events to keep the world in order. That's kind of how the Justice comes in. That's really the vibe. There's a pretty big tribe of Unseen. And you'll see here, they're the kind of the human aspects of the Huru. And they are big fans of owls. Big fans of owls. The Huru actually make friends with these giant wise owls, actually. One of the main flavors of the faction is having a lot of those. A lot of flight is common in the faction. A lot of Aegis, which is basically negate the first offensive spell on the unit. Pretty strong flavor of that in the faction. So kind of evasive, hard to kill. Not necessarily giant bombs, though one could argue that a 5/5 flyer for 4, as long as it has Aegis, is pretty much a bomb. But, it's not like giant 8/8s or huge, murder machines that swing in. Like consistent, evasive, and hard to deal with damage and threats is really kind of the Huru flavor. Again, more Unseen here, Deepwood Ranger, so very kind of natural, but using that power subtly to influence things in the right direction. That's kind of the vibe of the Huru. It's a neat faction. They have some pretty strong decks with the control or Huru Flyers elements where you just do all evasion all day. A lot of option denial here you'll see too. Removing a relic and changing any card with that name into this cursed relic, which doesn't do anything. Preventing enemies from playing spells. Preventing enemies from playing spells or weapons on your next turn. Did I say spells? I meant weapons, sorry. Weapons can't be played. I can't read English. You gain an Aegis, so the enemy spells can't do anything to you once you pick up a Duelist Blade. Things like that. So that's really the vibe of the faction. It's one of the stronger factions, I think, to play in general. Or you see this combination of Justice and Primal a lot, especially in control builds, but also in aggressive builds, and even in low to the ground builds. Like, it's a really viable faction. A lot of good stuff in it. The Huru, not too shabby for a bunch of tree-hugging owl worshippers. Next up is Argenport. Okay, so Argenport. What can we say about Argenport? Argenport is the capital of this fantasy continent/world of Myria. It's the capital city, so obviously Order. It's where Order comes from, but there's also a seedy underbelly full of dudes like... I gotta do this for a second. Full of dudes like this guy, who runs a cabal. Like Dieso. Oh, Dieso. Mr. Blomfeld, I presume. Anyway, so yeah, the Cabal and the actual proper Argenport forces are kind of going back and forth and trying to go and take control of the city in clever ways. But yeah, so Argenport has a Justice, Order side and a very dark side as well. You see that come around a lot here. So some direct kills, obviously, given the nature of the factions here. A lot of lifesteal. And you see a lot of revenge. Revenge is kind of a main Argenport flavor. Seed of Vengeance, which is pretty dope. I mean, there's blood at the seat of the throne, which is pretty cool. It's some really neat illustrations here. A lot of neat themes. Revenge is an ability that when the creature dies, you get a destiny, which means when you draw it, you play it for free, and you put in the top 10 cards of your deck. So it's going to be back, and it's going to be back quick. Stuff like Bloodletters, getting lifesteal this turn. Lifesteal and Revenge on Stonepowder Alchemist, probably one of the more workhorse cards of the faction. Does a lot of work in a lot of decks. Also have some Valkyries in here, like the Rooftop Vigilante, like Halle Berry as a Magitech Angel. Yes, please. Cool stuff like that. You have a lot of interesting quasi-corrupted paladins not necessarily, but let's just say there's an edge to them. The Anointer of the Faithful, or the Champion herself, who is definitely a paladin of sorts, invulnerable to damage. This comes up in a green flavor a lot, and +2 extra damage. In Argenport, of course, you have the ever-famous Inquisition, which hunts down people that know the truth about the first Battle of Argenport, where the guy actually killed his own men to save the city, known as Roland. But anyway, here is Inquisitor Mocto, leader of them with this awesome pink shades. I'm relatively certain this is kind of a play on... Oh God, what was the movie? It was about witch trials in France, and there was like this weird modern-ish vibe to it. And like the head priest there was this dude who wore like pink John Lennon framed glasses like in the 1700s. It made no sense. But anyway, I think honestly that's what the reference is. That's my guess. But yeah, so a lot of lifesteal, kind of vengeful, sanguine swords of doom. What it costs to keep order in a place like Myria, basically. Another big faction you'll see kind of in Arsotes to Argenport are Minotaurs. There's a very strong faction here called the Auric Bank, who have a lot of money and a lot of political clout as a result. And Tavrod and Tavgod that you saw in the first game of Eternal that I've ever shown on the channel, he is a rather prime example of that particular side of things. So definitely the vengeful, you know, sadistic, clever side of keeping order in a place like Myria is definitely something that you will see a lot of in this faction. Also very common color pairing for mid-range decks, very strong in the mid-range, and generally a pretty powerful faction overall, and a crap ton of flavor. Alright, last but not least, we have the Feln. Alright, so, the Feln. Feln are kind of... So, the tagline is they're a bunch of nature mages and shamans and things like that are shunned by everyone else because they do things that you shouldn't and play with blood magic and freaky stuff like that, and then they end up looking like this. Yeah. So, like I said, they don't really care about what they look like, what they end up, as long as they win, as long as they have power, as long as they have that wisdom that they're searching for. So, kind of a aggressive faction, a lot of, you know, I guess, sacrifice kill effects as well. You have feeding time, turning him into a pig and eating him, a withering witch, everything's health becomes 1. You know, and then you have probably one of the strongest champions in the game, and Champion of Cunning, which is a 5/5 flyer for 5, which has flying and Aegis if you have 5 blue, and +2 every turn when he has Shadow. So Infiltrate is a pretty strong flavor here, so is Lifesteal. Black Sky Harbinger, another clear representation. Probably one of the coolest cards out there, actually. But also, I mean, he's been here since the beginning, since the first set. Very, very strong. 4/5 flyer with lifesteal and does 1 damage to the entire board when he comes in. The enemy board, rather. You got some unseen here as well. Rindra is one of them. Again, kind of night-themed, nightfall, life-stealing murder machines, basically. One of the sub-themes that haven't been really explored here is like an elf tribal feeling. This is the only multi-faction elf that we have currently, I think. But in Shadow, there's a lot of elves. So there could be like a sub-theme they're building up to at some point, something called the Direwood in the lore. That's really kind of the vibe. Infiltration, like I said, is a major theme here. For example, Infiltrate, when you hit the enemy for the first time, you get Deadly and Quick Draw, and that turns this Gorgon thing into a very potent enemy indeed. Gorgons are also kind of a sub-theme here. You have the Swiftblade, you have the Fanatic who runs in, sacrifices himself, draws you cards, and you gain life. Crazy looking son of a gun, isn't he? And one of the more unique and emblematic decks in the faction is the Haunting Scream deck, which basically you can play a unit with 4 cost or less from your void. It gets charged and flying. So basically you can attack this turn, it gets some evasion, and then you dies at the end of the turn. So value cards that can be screamed, that do something when they come into play and also do good damage, are a big play here, or like one-hit kill combos that come out of nowhere. So a lot of cleverness, obviously, going with the Shadow faction, and a lot of the, I guess, the fury and weirdness of nature to make that happen is really kind of the vibe of the Feln. There's a really strong control, okay, not anymore, I guess, but pretty decent control archetype, and for a very long time was very strong in Feln control, mainly because of Black Sky Harbinger and Champion of Cunning as the 2 creatures, and everything else was just straight up removal. That was strong for a while. There's some aggro decks. There's not really a fell mid-range build right now, but I'm sure someone's brewing something up. Again, pretty flexible faction. Very good flavor. Haven't seen much in the lore per se, but pretty clear what these guys are and what they're doing, which makes things pretty interesting. So I think that'll be about it for this second half of the section. I do hope you enjoyed that. Another dive into the lore and world of Eternal. I will probably be back with some gameplay soon when I decide to record something new. Might even do a Sealed League for next month. I think that might be fun for people to see how the Sealed League works, because this month we did pretty good. I'll do a summary at the end. I was pretty happy with my performance this month. So we'll see how I do it next month. I might do it week to week. I was kind of slacking this month, and did all the games last week. So all toward the end when the deck was already filled out, I might do it week to week, so you kind of see how the deck builds out over the month. That could be a fun little thing we can do. But to be seen in the future. But again, I'm really kind of happy with the overall response to the Eternal content, that people are actually viewing it, which is really nice. I think it's nice to see a change, I suppose. And if there's something you want me to address specifically, let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to take a look. If you're talking about, how to start, what kind of builds you're thinking of, if you're trying to start in the game, like where do we go from here, what's a good deck or deck advice, or anything you feel like, happy to chat. And again, if you're enjoying the stuff, do leave a thumbs up. It always helps to let me know there's something worthwhile to continue doing. That's enough of me talking. Until next time, I've been Nurse, and I'll see you. Till then.